Okay, so I just wanted to go over a couple of things that I think we just need to make a little bit more clear about what I was trying to tell you in class today. I was talking about how it is really important that you practice to stitch out each one of the stitch samples with the angle that you think that you're going to want to use in your finished product. And one of the points that I was trying to make with you all is that depending on the stitch pattern that you're choosing, the finished length is going to differ based on what that stitch pattern is. So for example, I had my little sample in class of what we were using today, and I thought that it was really important to try to note that when you sample them out and you stitch them out with the angle of the taper that you have chosen, that length is going to differ. We were using the example of having a 2-inch space from the upper line down to the second line that we drew on our fabric, and we started off stitching at the top, and when we got down to the bottom of our 2-inch mark, that's when we hit the lock stitch button so that then the machine could add in finishing off that stitch pattern as well as adding in that tapered angle at the end. If you were to look really closely at this stitch pattern that I've repeated over and over again, you would probably see that most of them have, I counted them out earlier, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think it was about 6 stitch patterns. Sometimes it was more or less, and that would also depend on how profound that taper is. So for example, when we've got the 30-degree taper, that's a much stronger taper than what the 90 degree or 45 degree or something like that is. So that longer taper is going to take up more space, and therefore the stitch repeat pattern isn't going to start quite as soon as when the taper was a more narrow taper. I'm having a little bit of difficulty trying to show it here on the screen because everything is in reverse of how I'm moving. So anyway, so I know that you can see when you look at this close up that, for example, 45 degrees, the taper's not taking up as much pattern as what the 30-degree taper is. Can you see this? We're going from this direction to that direction. So this one here, taking up less space. 30-degree taper, it's taking up a lot more of the stitch pattern. 60-degree taper, not taking up as much of a stitch pattern. So the 60-degree taper, I'm looking at it and I can see that the pattern repeated 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it's 5 times. It's a little bit difficult to keep track of counting it. But the reason I'm trying to make a point of this is in our next class, we're actually going to try to make a stitch sampler very similar to the one that I had up at the shop that was up for display. And I was trying to explain to you all that when you are using the tapered stitches, usually when you're working with a decorative stitch motif and let's say you're trying to make a big square frame, you can actually measure out on your fabric that you want to have a 10-inch square. And if you're using a regular decorative stitch and you're starting at one corner and you are stitching across to the other corner, stopping at your 10-inch mark, starting at that, going back down and stopping at the 10-inch mark, you can predetermine that 10-inch square. And I'm just using 10 inch as an example. It doesn't necessarily have to really be 10 inches. But with a tapered, you don't have control over how the machine is determining that extra length that it's adding in for that taper. So I'm hoping that that's making sense to you, because the point of it is that if you wanted to make a big square, you're going to have to work from making your big square first and then filling in the little details of the motifs and so forth that we're going to work on in next class after that square is made. So I hope that that makes sense to you. I have been just really trying to think of a way that would make it really clear. You can't work from the middle out because you don't know how big that outer piece is going to be, because you don't know how big the stitch pattern is, that stitch length pattern. Now, if you were insisting on trying to work from the outside, making your outside frame first and then filling it in with decorative motifs in the middle of the section, if you had a lot of scrap fabric, properly stabilized, etc., it has to be exactly like what you want to sew on, you could do a practice stitch out of a line that you are estimating is going to be about the line length that you need for your finished product. And because you do have to sample everything beforehand anyway, then you could possibly figure it out. But I think that the easiest way to try to get all of this to work together is really working from the outside toward the center. So you're going to build your big frame on the outside, and then you're going to figure out how many little motifs are going to fit into the center part so that you can create your design. This is really kind of backwards thinking from what we normally do when we're making items like this. Okay, so I know that it's a little bit of a difficult concept to comprehend, but I would encourage you to read through the handout that I gave you today. Just kind of go through it step by step. And if you want to, probably repeat all of the exercises that are on there on some really good stabilized fabric. Some of you, your fabrics weren't quite stabilized quite enough today. And again, I can't stress enough that that is going to be one of the most critical components of this. Really stiffly starched fabric. And then that fusible poly mesh fused onto the back side of it. So let's say, for example, that your fabric has not absorbed starch well, like Barbara's today. You are really just going to have to work very, very hard at just trying to keep that fabric nice and flat and keeping it from having a lot of movement as those stitches are forming on there, because that is where you're going to get your preciseness from, so that all of your corners are going to match up when you're making different shapes with the tapering mode. All right, so I'm hoping that that's making sense to you. I think that in the week before we get to meet again for our second session of our tapering class, that you will take time to just go ahead and stitch out. Probably you might want to do almost every single one of the stitches that's available with the angles that are available for the tapering mode. So for example, I'm just going to try to pop this back up again. What I did with this particular motif, let's see if I can get it in front of the camera well enough. I think the stitch number was maybe number 33 or whatever it may be. And I stitched out every single angle. I did 45. I did 30. I did 60. Then I did the pointed mode ones. I did the 60 degree, the backwards here, 90 degree, and then the last one was the 120 degree. And you can see that I marked my fabric with what direction those angles were at. You had the mirror image tool available to do like the 45s, the 60s, and the 30s, and I did not do the mirror image of them. I just felt like what I was looking for was adequately explained in this. I saw what a 45 degree angle looks like, whether or not it happened to be this direction or facing the other direction. Same thing went for the 30 degree and the 60 degree angles. So again, it was just that particular stitch done over and over again. The main point of it was, can I get them to actually be the same size? If I've started off at that same starting point, hit my lock stitch button at the same ending point, and just to see how the different lengths of the stitch will vary based on the angle of the taper. Okay, I think that's enough for now. I'm going to see if this video actually recorded well enough so that I can email it all to you. If you have questions, don't hesitate to send me an email or try to contact me, and I'll see if I can help you. Okay? It was a fun class. I came home tired. I know you all probably did as well. So talk to you later. Bye-bye.